This is very exciting, and I'm just going to take a very brief moment to start the first of the welcomes to everybody, and a special, very special welcome to Shanthini. It's an honor that you have joined us. I use this word deliberately. I use this word because I know what you have done. Time is going to honor you for it. So therefore, I've taken the advantage of leapfrogging that and saying it is an honor. Thank you very much for the time you're taking. Thank you very much for everybody who's joined. You know, Value had started these sessions last month, Women's Month. We had one session. We felt that we needed a few more sessions in the course of the month. We had a few more sessions in the course of the month. We then thought, hang on a second, this just can't be left only to the month of August, once a year. So Celebrating Women is a program that we've started that will run every month, where we bring in, I think, remarkable and outstanding women who are going to have conversations. Mine is a brief task just to, before I hand over to those of you who know Refuelware as the host for these programs. And it is fitting, Shanthini, that you start off these programs after the course of August. It is fitting in the conversation that you're going to have and what you have done. So thank you for that. So to everybody who's here, welcome, and let's enjoy this. Saturday morning, it's Heritage Month, so let's kick off. So without further ado, Refuelware, I'll pass the ball to you.
Thank you, Vic. Thank you, Vic. And good morning, everybody. Welcome to those who've joined us before. Welcome back again. And to those who are joining us for the first time, welcome to the Value family. As Vic said, we started these events last month, and we decided, you know, this is a very important conversation to have, and we cannot just have it in the month of August. So we are continuing with these events, celebrating the great women who, you know, have paved the way and continue to pave the way, doing great things in their various industries and aspects of their lives. So, you know, today we have a great guest. It really is an honor, as Vic said, to welcome Shanthini Naidoo, you know, who's an author and is doing great, amazing things. So just to introduce Shanthini, she's an established South African journalist with 18 years of media and management experience. Her first book, which everybody should get, by the way, Women in Solitary, Looking Inside the Female Resistance to Apartheid. She is skilled in storytelling, thought leadership, writing and editing and producing of content, of print and digital content, podcasting and webinar production. Welcome, Shanthini. You know, it really is an honor, and thank you for taking the time this morning to join us here. I'll let you just say hi to everybody.
Hi, Refuelware, and hi, everyone who's watching. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, thank you. So today, you know, the theme for this Value event is obviously celebrating women, but we're also looking, as you know, the quote that I have before, amplifying the female voice. You know, a lot of people say, let's give women a voice. No, we have a voice, thank you. Let's just give us an opportunity now to really say what we need to say. So the theme for this, for these events is really talking about how do we amplify the female voice in the various sectors and, you know, different paths that we are taking in our journeys. And I'm really excited for the book, right? Because, you know, it's Heritage Month, and part of our heritage is looking at our history and, you know, looking at the backbone of our society, which is women, right? So your book looks at the story of 4 women, Mama Joyce Kakane Rankin, who is actually listening in today. Good morning, Mama. It also looks at, you know, you tell the story of Rita Nzanga, Shanthi Naidoo, and Nondwe Makatla. And, you know, their stories of, you know, their refusal to testify in the apartheid era trial of 22 in 1969. You know, a trial that included the late Mama Winnie Madikizela Mandela. And I like the fact that you took this opportunity to explore the female experiences of activism and how women take on additional political roles in their personal lives. I was born in 1994, so really all I know about apartheid is from history books. And a lot of times what we've heard is the stories of great activists, that they are Nelson Mandela, Walter Sisulu's, all these great men who have done great work. But the stories of the women, it's not there as much or as equal as those of the men. And as we know, if it weren't for Mama Madikizela Mandela, amplifying and talking and pushing the story of Nelson Mandela while he was in prison, the history may look different to what we have right now. So I'm really excited for this book, because we need to know the stories of these women who were there, pushing, raising us as the kids, but also pushing the struggle and the activism. So what was the experience writing this book, and how did it all start with you getting this idea to tell the stories of these women?
Okay, well, you've hit it exactly the nail on the head. This is the book. Quickly, you've all seen it on the flyer, but the story started off in April 2018. It was when Mam Winnie, as you rightly say, had passed away, and the stories that emerged from her death were really one-sided. They were not telling the entire story of her life and of her activism. It's interesting how she was called Nelson Mandela's wife, and how it was reported that way, that she was Nelson Mandela's wife, which is wonderful, but it's not. That was one of many facets of Mam Winnie. And while reporting on the death of Winnie Mandela and during her funeral, I came across this trial, which wasn't very well known. It's known to historians and activists who were there in 1969, but it was the big trial which saw Winnie Mandela and the women in the story detained for over a year. And exactly as you say, and people don't realize this, there was a long period in apartheid and during the struggle, where the leadership was not visible. They were either in exile or in prison, and the people that stayed behind and did the work were the women. They were obviously male activists as well, but it was 1969. It wasn't even a progressive time for women at that stage. So for me to find these women in the trial and to meet them, like Mam Joyce and Auntie Shanti and Marita and Manondwe, they all were in the same trial as Mam Winnie, and then were so it was such an important and such a significant trial, because they were tortured basically to testify against each other, and they were very vital to the movement at that time. They were young, but they were the very brave and very active members of the ANC, and had they testified against each other, they would have experienced longer detentions. I mean, they were never charged even in this trial. So it's quite an important thing that if they had given in to that torture and the detention, which was in solitary confinement, so it was really, really a tough sort of detention compared to other political detentions. So had they testified, they would have also been in prison. And then, exactly as you say, who knows where our democracy would have gone. So these women are very, very significant. I think played such an important part of in our history, and we just didn't know the story. I didn't know the story as a journalist for many years. And I was very, very pleased and fortunate to spend the time with the Rankin family and the women, the other women in the trial. So, and that's where we out with the book at the moment. But the story it's about many women. And that's the whole point, is that if we know this story, which was very significant, we must go and search for the other ones that we don't know.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And there's a part in the book, not to give it away, but when you talk about the trial and how these women were called up to testify against their friends, their comrades, and you have Auntie Shanti, who was called up to the docket, and she said, I will, if to quote it, I want to say it correctly, I have two friends amongst the accused, she declared. I don't want to give evidence because I will not live with my conscience if I do. And when she was threatened further with further imprisonment, she said, I'm prepared to accept it. And the part where you say, with those three short sentences uttered in defiance, the foundation of the state case began to crumble. I mean, that sentence for me, because, we talk about the voice, right? The voice of women. And the fact that, those women, young as they were, I mean, I think she was 33 years old, and the bravery of to stand there knowing that, they could have further imprisonment. But those short sentences, those three short sentences just, change the state case. So I think it's just it shows how important it is to be given that platforms as women, because when we use our voices, I mean, look at what, we can achieve and what those women achieved. So my question, now looking at our state right now, political state, looking at our, South Africa right now, we've had one of our one of the youngest MPs, actually, I'm not sure if she's on the call today, Nompendulo, but she was part of the Fees Must Fall movement, and you'd see this young woman right there in front, in defiance. So it just goes to show how women, when we're given an opportunity, we can really make great change. What do you think that us as women right now, as young women in particular, can do more of, or should start doing, the same way that Mom Joyce and them did back in apartheid, to now have this history that we have, which is democracy? What is it that us as young women in particular could do more of?
Yes, and that's very much part of the book. It's to say that there are different struggles now. Some of the struggles are still the same, but the big struggles that we face are still there. We look at how women are still doing a huge amount of unpaid work in the world. When we look at how the gender-based violence statistics in South Africa, and when we look at just how the patriarchy is still here, how we still have so many different issues which have not gone away even from those times. Black Lives Matter is such an important discussion that has come up now, and who are the people that are having these discussions? It's our youth, it's our young people. So the struggle may be different, but it is still a struggle, and this is why it's so important for young people to find their voice and to make those voices heard. And I think the point of the book was, it's a 1969 trial, it's 50 years ago. But the point is that it shows us how brave, despite the really terrible circumstances that the women were faced with, how they still, exactly as you say, how Auntie Shanti stood up against, courtroom full of lawyers and to a very strict judge, and and to her special branch interrogators, who were these big burly men who had physically tortured all of them and still managed to say that I won't testify against my friends. So and that was a big moment. It was a big announcement to have made it, and it did start the collapse of the trial. But the point of, especially something like when we look at the Me Too movement and Fees Must Fall, these are discussions that happened collectively. They are movements that happened collectively, but they started off by smaller voices, people who came together collectively and made a big noise because they were standing together. So it started on social media, and it started on, on the campuses and things like that. So it's up to each one of us to find that voice within us. And I think that for young people, especially young women, to feel strong enough to take a stand and to say something is something that I hope people will take away from the book, because and from the stories that we're telling, because that is important, is to find the voice within, and where does that bravery come from?
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely, absolutely. And for everybody who's who's here, for those who've joined before and those who are new, these sessions are very interactive. So we do want people, if you have questions, if you have comments, please do, put them through on the chat box. Towards the end, we will start have a, question and answer session. And if people are keeping quiet, we will pick on you. That's what we do at Evaluate. We'll pick on you. So just keep those comments coming. I'm seeing some incredible stuff. Nomvula has put up something about Mama Joyce, which is great because we like to know that people are doing their research before they come to these events. So that's really great. Coming back to you, Shantini, what was your experience through when you were writing this book? You've had great career in journalism. So this is, and you, like you said, mentioned before, you were covering the death of Mama Winnie Mandela. So you've been in this space of, covering many stories, but these ones in particular, what was the experience like during writing it, and then also post writing the book?
It's so interesting. I have to confess something. I started out in media as a lifestyle journalist and a news journalist. It was something that, I have huge passion around travel and food and all these sorts of things. And what happened in that time was that as you experience the world, and I think many of us who go out into the world and who in our careers find this, is that we start off thinking about the glamorous side of things and how, we, especially post 94, your generation has been lucky to be, in a different South Africa compared to the ones that I grew up in, and which Mom Joyce grew up in. So you take these opportunities and they're amazing and they really are, should open your eyes to the world. But at the same time, even in doing work, whether it is in fashion or in technology or as I was doing in travel and food and news as well, you start to see patterns, and part of those patterns is a discomfort. As I started to realize what it was, it's discomfort in that why are we not in this kind of space? Why are we not in a space where where women can feel very free? Why are we not in a space where, as people of color, we aren't entirely comfortable where we are? And I think that discomfort grew, especially around the time that Winnie Mandela passed away. So Mama Winnie's death, if you remember, there was a huge social media storm around her passing on, because the stories that came out were just not fair. They were not telling her story in entirety. And there were a number of people, journalists, especially women, who came out and said, this is not the story. This is not who she was. What about the woman who was dragged away from her children? What about the woman who spent all that time in prison, and then she was banished to Brandfort and things like that. So what happened, and what was the effect of this? So that was where my story came from. And in speaking to Mom Joyce and Auntie Shanthi and her comrades who were with her, especially Marita was very close to her as well. The story that emerged from there was that there's, first of all, this lack of recognition of these women who did such brave things and were really, I think, cornerstones of our history. And even though they'd won, presidential awards and things like that, why didn't the rest of us in South Africa know enough about them? So that was how the story evolved for me. And I had, lovely meetings, maybe not too many, but conversations with the families and with the women, which I'm very, very grateful for, and so privileged to have been able to do, because it was a learning for me as well, to find out the story and to tell it. So so that is how the story unfolded. And you know, I did it initially as an academic study into why the female resistance stories are not told as well as they should be. And the story was just so powerful that the publisher picked it up. You know, it was something that was not, I was thrilled to do it, but it was something that other people could see had great value in South Africa. It's things that we needed to know, which is where the genesis of the book came from. And afterwards, sure, you know, when it was published, I expected it to be a fascinating story because I was fascinated by it. But the reaction of people to these stories has been unbelievable. I think if there's one aim, which is to cement these names in our history, I think we're getting there. It's nearly there.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. We are getting there. And I think it's books like yours, which, you know, spark the conversations to say we don't have enough stories of female activists, and, you know, how do we get now to have that, whether we need to change the history curriculums, or we need to have, you know, webinars like these, or have, you know, something. We just need more of these because it's just not there, right? And I think it's important because, you know, reading a book like this, you're not only learning the history and the journey, but you're also learning about the kind of women that we had, you know, before this, the likes of Mama Joyce, you know, in terms of integrity, ethics, you know, just the sort of women that we had back then, right? And for somebody like myself, a young woman like myself, I get to learn from those women, right? You know, like I said, the struggles are different, but the struggle is still there. So as a young woman in corporate, how do I now handle things like the Me Too movement? You know, how do I voice my opinion? How do I tell my truth, but in a manner that's still true to myself, in a manner that's still graceful, and I'm now not, you know, not being true to myself. So I think it's important to tell these stories because they teach us a lot. You know, it's part of that shaping of character as well. So I just wanted to go through just some of the comments on the chat box just to see what we have there. Okay, we have Jolly, who said, what an incredible legacy and gift to us from Mom Joyce. Nomvula, who says, I would love to hear what Mama Joyce thinks of the current cohort of women, especially around integrity, ethics, courage, and choosing to stand up for each other, because we tend to shy away from these actions. Everyone is looking after their own interests. I don't know if Mama Joyce is up to speak to us. I know she was just coming into, you know, to just watch. So I don't know if she's going to want to join and say a few words, Mr. Rankin?
No, I think Mom's just going to listen.
Mom's going to listen.
Yeah,
Perhaps I think, you know, Shanthini.
And at the huge risk of, which I've already taken, of speaking on behalf of these amazing women, I will share what Mom Joyce said in the book.
Yes.
And she speaks about there was disappointment, that there is you know, disappointment in how the movement has changed, and in how current day is it's almost you know, it's not taking away from what they did, because we are here in this democracy, we are here, and it's still a really good space to be in. But at the same time, that it's sometimes forgetful that this current state of being is, and the people that are in it and the leaders are forgetful. They've not acknowledged enough. And it's, you know, it's funny because I actually start the book off with our constitution, which says that we must always honor and uphold those who came before us. And when we do things that are not in line with their values, we're not upholding them, we're not valuing them. And so there is some level of disappointment in that. But at the same time, Joyce said something which was very significant and which I've taken with me a lot, is that we are still a young democracy. This story happened 50 years ago. Their activism started before then. So to expect everything to be perfect now, it's an impossible task. They say we must have patience and we must be prepared, as they did, to take the long road, because that is what it was. It was decades and decades of work that got us to where we are today. And we can't expect, it's asking a lot of ourselves to be able to be in a perfect space now. There is no perfect space, actually, it doesn't exist. So the other important thing is that we can, how to do it, and how as women of today and in corporate spaces, is to, it's actually scientific studies that have been done on this, that South Africa is not a healed country from our very long struggle. And this goes back, if you want to take it back to colonialism, we've got 100 years, hundreds of years to make up. And apartheid was, you know, that period from 1942 or so. So we've got many years to recover from this. And what they call generational trauma, which exists in our country, can be lessened by a very simple a form of therapy, which is storytelling. And the storytelling is the one, is exactly part of it, is what we've done with this book, is to tell these stories of came before us, those are now who are going through whatever they are going through, and you know, and the young people, to hear from them and to see what is everyone going through, how can we work through this together. And it sounds very simplistic, but it's been done in war-torn countries, it's been done in places where they've had severe conflict, like Northern Ireland, where it's a method of us, first of all, as South Africans, identifying these stories and these people who are who we live amongst and who we work amongst. And it's very interesting that Letseko is here as well, because, you know, we found a common denominator in a workplace. So these are people that we work with, that we travel with, that we pass on the street, who have all been affected by this generational trauma. And how are we handling each other? How are we dealing with each other on a daily basis? And until we do it from a place of knowledge, it is going to be a long and evolving process. So that's the other thing, is to learn the patience from these women. Never mind their 491 odd days that they spent in prison in solitary confinement by themselves, as in the only people that they saw were the interrogators, and if they were on trial. So imagine the patience it took to deal with that, and to still come out intact afterwards, and then also to still spend the years and decades afterwards as part of our fight for democracy. So yeah, it is a lesson in patience, which I know lots of us don't have.
No, definitely. I was going to just say that, you know, a lot of us need to just be a little bit more patient, especially I think as these young people. You know, I know for myself, you know, I think last weekend, Vic was actually talking to myself and Dumisa about being a little bit more patient, because we're so in a hurry to be successful, whatever that means. So definitely patience is a big one. But I want to hear from, you know, from everybody who's here this morning. What is your take on this? Well, if you haven't, you know, if you've read the book, did you enjoy it? What was your biggest takeaway? But just so far in terms of the conversation, and, you know, we talk about the history and the stories of those who came before us. You know, I know a lot of us, you know, if you're fortunate enough, like myself, you know, our grandmothers tell us these stories about how it was back in the days. What is everybody's take on this? Any comments, anything you would like to share? Feel free, guys. A very interactive session.
So can I quickly jump in, and I'll obviously leave it to the floor, and just say, you know, I'm actually just wanting to thank everybody that's come to this today, but specifically I'd like us to point out to some of the, you know, value-add students that are actually here. So I'm really impressed. This is obviously a voluntary thing. Well done for coming on and taking time out in the initiative. I see my son is here as well. So I think it's very exciting to be able to listen to history and authors, and be able to take something away from the constructs of that. So yeah, to them very specifically, value it, guys, and well done for coming through.
Thank you, Vic. Anything from the floor? Anyone want to add anything?
So I'll kick off. I see everybody's a bit struggling with the question, Shantini. And I just like to acknowledge that, you know, we celebrate women, and there are men who have come through who really need to be listening to the conversation. I always say we need to listen rather than assume, you know. And there was a question earlier on very specific to, you know, what it is that we do next. I'm really interested in your thought as a country now, jointly, men and women. What is the role that we should be playing in terms of trying to participate in this healing process, in this change process? Because I think we know, but we haven't really asked the question as to what is it that we should be doing in terms of, you know, participating rather than assuming that we have the answers.
That's a great one, Vic.
Did you direct that at me or the
Yes, I did. Yes, I did.
Okay, I'm really.
Hi. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Go ahead,
Who's speaking?
Hi. First, I wanted to say it's an honor to have Mama Joyce amongst us. I actually learned about her this year. Second, I think what Shanthini has done is an incredible service to our history. And we need to be in a position to be able to tell the history from our perspective, and to be able to share it with generations that follow. And I was blessed to have been raised by my grandmother, and some of the stories that she shared about her experience of the past regime, how they were treated. And I am so passionate about it and so inspired about it that I'm able to share those stories that were shared with me with my child, and hopefully we will keep the memory of what our people have endured running through the generations that follow, through storytelling, through writing books, through engaging in platforms such as this. And yeah, thank you guys for putting it together and extending the invite.
Thank you, Nambula. Thank you very much.
Tia, can I come in?
Yes, please.
Good morning to, oh, it's still morning. Yes, it's morning. Good morning to everyone. Nompendulo Kajwa here. Thank you so much, you know, for this conversation. I also have the honor of sitting on the board of the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation. And there's a project we've currently been on in honoring all the 20,000 women who participated in the 1956 march. And ultimately out of this conversation, well, the 1956 Women's March, that is, and ultimately out of this conversation, you know, there's a huge chat about recognizing the role that women have played in the development, well, firstly, in liberating our country, and secondly, in the development of our country as a democratic republic. And ultimately, undoing the masculine and the white nature in the, of the manner in which history is told. And what I would like to see as an MP, and I continue advocating for this as an activist as well, is to ensure that these stories are part and parcel of our curriculum, that these are the stories that, you know, children are learning in the history books that are being provided in the school setup, where when we do projects, that these are women like Mama Joyce, or the woman that we're speaking about in our projects, and we aren't regurgitating the same leaders. And not to say that there's anything bad, you know, when we speak about advocating for more stories to be told, we don't speak about diminishing the value that those whose stories have been told have played in our liberation and in the development of our country. And we must be very wary of that. So when we say, yeah, but we don't want to hear about Mandela anymore, we don't want to hear about Winnie anymore, or, you know, we mustn't say we don't want to hear about them anymore, but we must rather say we want to hear more about other women, about other leaders that played a great role in our liberation and in the development of our country. So I want to say thank you very much to the team Delhi Ed, for putting this together, and we truly appreciate the work that's been done. And I think all of us in our different spaces, as business people, as activists, as advocates, or whoever we are, as teachers, we need to really find a way to collaborate in ensuring that our history is preserved and that it's taught in various spaces. So for me, that's the only contribution that I have this morning. Thank you so much, Rufus.
Thank you, Nampendulo.
That's amazing. Sure, and this is something that's so interesting for me as a journalist. Even in our school curriculum and in our tertiary curriculum, these stories don't exist. We, I did contemporary history, and that was in the early 2000s, and we were still doing World War I and World War II, which is not, again, as exactly as you say, it's not that we must not acknowledge what we know already or what the narratives are already, but we've got to shift them and we've got to make them evolve and change. So that's exactly it, is to not have a single narrative, to not have the that extreme of young people now rejecting the Mandela narrative, but to make it much more rich and much more value. And the Ahmed Kadzrada Foundation does amazing work with that. So in fact, we're due to do something together as well. So yeah, it's about sharing those stories. And hopefully the school curriculum will change. Until then, we've got to do the work, exactly, even to do it in our homes, to talk to our young people, and for the young people who are listening to go out and find those stories. They are there. Yes, we do need to still do a lot of work, but it's available even on social media. I saw a lovely thread about which looks at it only looks at South African Black women and the contribution over the years. So it is there if you're looking.
No, absolutely, absolutely. And I love, what you've just said, and what Nompendulo also said about collaborations, because I think, each of us has a responsibility and also can do something in our own space, whether you heard your grandmother tell you a story about, your little village and how whatever happening there, and you tweet about it. I think you mentioned there's a lady on Twitter who's teaching, history on Twitter, and I've actually followed her threads, which are very interesting because that's the platform that I'm, always on most of the time. So definitely each of us has a responsibility, whether you're in school, ask your teachers to look at another aspect, another story. Whether you are on Twitter and you read something, post it, YouTube. There's so many platforms for us to be collaborating and to teach each other. So there's a question on the floor, and I think it's a very interesting one. Didi Nklemutunyana said, interesting discussion, heartwarming to take time to reflect on the actions taken by women to get us here. We always talk about our democracy being young. And I've always wondered, at what point is democracy considered matured? What timelines are we working towards? I think that's a very interesting one.
Very interesting. I just look at the United States, for a good idea about that. Look at the UK and realize where we are.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. It is going to take us, quite a bit of time. I think when even when you talk about poverty, it's going to take about 9 generations for us to get to a level where we are all, okay. So it's definitely going to take time. I think we just need to continue having these discussions. And perhaps then we'll make that period shorter as well, because we're not repeating it, and we're not letting it just go by. Mahlati has his hand up. Mahlati. Mahlati.
Sorry about that. How are you guys? My
Well.
name is Mahlati. I have 4 questions actually for Mrs. Naidoo. So please feel free to help her answer them. So the first question I have is, what are the opportunities that are underlying for women in modern day South Africa? So that's my first question. And the second one is, what are your thoughts on GBV? gender-based violence right now in South Africa, both positive and negative, and what are your thoughts on that? And the third question I have is, in your book, Women in Solitary, what do you hope to teach women, and like what are your goals and your aims with the book? And last question is, what are your thoughts on Kamala Harris? How important is she to our generation, especially women in leadership? Thank you.
Wow.
Ask like a true teacher.
Yep.
Thanks for that. The first one, opportunities for women. I think if you are in the right space in South Africa, you will find that there are lots of opportunities for women. We are, you know, I happen to have left journalism mainstream in recent years and work for a large corporate, which I won't name, but it's very progressive. And I think that there are lots of acceleration programs for women in South Africa at the moment. They have to be, because we're not in an equal space at the moment. So we need to leverage those opportunities. There are advantages for us. So especially as Black women, we must make the effort. First of all, we've got to put in our own effort and then make use of the opportunities that are out there, because especially it starts with the education, it starts with the empowerment of our young girls. And once we do that, the world is really in a good space. I think especially since this pandemic, I read somewhere recently, I think in The Guardian, about how COVID-19 has brought out every underlying issue that humanity is facing, whether it be environmental or in terms of gender equality and more. So now is the time. There's a lovely T-shirt that I saw. I think it's one of our local designers has made it. It says the time is now. I really think that it is an opportunity at the moment for us to take advantage, because people are listening, and maybe listening a lot more closely than they used to. So definitely there, they just have to be found. And yes, we must take advantage of them, specifically as women, because we, like I said, the playing field is not equal, as much as we've got other economic issues in South Africa. The gender-based violence problem is, again, I think comes down to this unhealed trauma in South Africa. It is something that, because of the effects on our economy, I think that's where it starts off. The disempowered male is always going to react in a way that empowers them in whatever way that they can, and it takes nothing for a person to be able to inflict violence on a woman. So the more disempowered our young men and boys are, the more we're going to see this gender-based violence. It comes from that psychological space of the unhealed trauma, but also the economic effects, which have to be dealt with very, very speedily. It's a huge challenge in our country, and I think there's a lot of work going into it. And if we, if we start with one child, we'll get there. But hugely problematic in South Africa, and it comes from our past. We've got to realize why this is so prevalent in our society, and who was able to make change and who can make change. I think it's again, it's something that comes down to this unequal male-female narrative that we have in big business, in government. Once we start making positive change as men, then we are going to see, we will be able to see differences. And we know that throughout the world, that the men still hold the power to do this and empower those who come below them. And then your third question about what I hope the book will teach.
Sorry, Shanthini, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but I think we are graced by, if I'm not mistaken, by Shanti Naidoo.
I hope so.
Oh, wow.
Who has joined. Am I correct?
Let's have a look.
Dominic?
Wait a minute. There you are. Just say yes.
Hello, everybody.
Gee, wow.
Hi, Joyce. It's so nice seeing you. Are you well?
I'm fine. How are you?
Nice to see you.
Good to see you.
Thank you for coming on. Thank you so much. I had to dash out of the room just to confirm with Mum that that Shanti is
How are
actually
you, veteran? I
online.
haven't seen you in years.
Yes, no, it's been a few years. It's been many, many years. Just for the purposes for everybody to understand, Shanthini, maybe you can just quickly explain, because now there might be confusion on names and etc. etc.
Names. I know I have a similar name to Auntie Shanti, but I'm not the Shanti Naidoo in the book. So Auntie Shanti, who's here, was one of the women we were talking about earlier who were part of the trial of 22 in 1969. And the friend she was talking about when she refused to testify, one of them was Mam Winnie and the other one was Joyce.
Wow, thank you. It's an absolute honor. It's an absolute honor.
Amazing. I have goosebumps. Thank you for coming.
Me too.
How incredible.
Wow.
Anyway.
Shame. And Ms. Latzi's questions, sorry, I'll go through very quickly. I think I touched on earlier the hope for the book and the storytelling as an important part of our South African healing. And that's that the story becomes widely known and that these names are forever cemented in our history is my ultimate aim. And the last thing, Kamala Harris in the US. Look, I can't say I agree with every single of her, every single stance of hers. There are some, you know, some things that are not as progressive, like her anti-abortion sort of her narrative that she's followed. But apart from that, it's amazing to have a woman of color and someone who has done so much work in terms of social justice in the US to be in the position that she is. I think she's already, you know, cemented her space in history and will do really amazing things. And, you know, it's a very like sad day in the US at the moment. We had the death of the icon RBG, I'm saying it wrong now, Ruth Ginsburg, the other, you know, they've got, because the US, by their nature of being such a massive force in the world and having such impact on our media, our social media and things like that, it's always nice to have women visible in those spaces. So very glad to, yes, to have heard that she is going to be there. I hope that answers all your questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you.
Awesome. Do we have anybody else who would like to add before we just get on to closing? I don't see hands. Okay, I know, you know, Shanthini, you've spoken about, you know, the purpose and what you would hope to, you know, what you hope the book, the message and everything. Oh, I have a hand, sorry. Before I get to that, we have a hand, Jolly Mokorosi.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for recognizing the hand. Thanks for organizing the guys who did. Shantini, I just want to say thanks for the book. I had written it in the comments. I don't know if you saw it, but I really do believe that one of the things that will help us is if more journalists write books. There's a lot of books that are written out there, and there's a superiority when a person has learned how to communicate in a language that comes through, and that allows us to pass on things with excellence. Every single book that I've ever read that was written by a journalist has been thoroughly enjoyed because they understand how to communicate language, and also how they research it is different from how a normal person would. And then the second group of people I just want to touch on is I just want to thank those who allowed themselves to be interviewed. I think one of our biggest struggles as Africans is that we often don't want to tell our stories because we don't want to show off, in a sense, in inverted commas. And unfortunately, the unintended consequence of sometimes of those stories is, or not telling those stories is, we don't pass on to our children. We don't, they don't know what happened. They don't know how we got to this point. And then I like your point that you said on history that, you know, it's not to negate particular parts of history. It's good for us to learn about the First World War and the Anglo-Boer War, but 5 years running in high school, I remember the same curriculum being regurgitated when there was so much more out there. Yeah, and having said that, I also want to honor a practice that my parents had. My mother, being a history teacher, decided that we would travel the country by road and we would go to every single museum in every single town that we went through. And I have the same practice with my children. So I have personally taken the stance as a parent that I will teach my children history differently from what's inside the textbooks. And they've met historical figures because of that, and they've had a very different level of exposure. But what's been sad for me is when I often enter museums is how empty they are, that our children are not going to those places. And I've met some struggle heroes that I didn't know of in those museums, sitting there waiting for us to approach them, waiting to tell us their stories. So I really think that as Africans, we do have a problem with how we communicate, be it the quantum or the timing or whatever it is. If you travel to a place like the US, around every corner there's a memorial for something or other, and they make a big deal of their history. I really think that we can learn from that and certainly take a leaf out of that in how we honor our elders, present and past as well. In our family, we're quite fortunate. We do have one person who has authored a book, and this is where I just want to also encourage our elders. My husband's great-grandmother released a book last year on Basotho architecture. I think she was 94 or something like that. And I was thoroughly tickled pink by the fact that she did it. There's a lot about Basotho culture that I absolutely did not know before she pulled that together. And I thoroughly appreciate it. So I think if we can continue to encourage our elders, we'd go a long way. And if I can say, Shanti, please encourage your journalist friends to write books. And may you also continue to write books. Trained professionals telling our stories comes out really, really differently. And thanks to the person who posted on the lady on Twitter. I am following her as of 5 minutes ago. I really do appreciate that. Thanks for the guys who pulled all of this together.
Thank you, Johnny. Thank you. That was really great.
Can I just share one thing with, I really loved everything that you said. And the one important thing that I realized in producing this book, and I know Refiwe asked me this earlier, but there are two challenges about telling stories. And the one is to have the time and the resources, which I am, like I said, I feel very well supported by both my Sunday Times family and also my current, employer, who've been very supportive in creating it. Because it is a lot of work, it's not hugely profitable business, and this is all that journalists want to do, is to tell these stories. So, but the important part of it is that at the same time that we must buy books, we have to support the industry. It makes, it's not about enriching anyone, because at the end of the day, it's such a, to produce something like this, I can tell you it's millions of characters in there, and each one of them takes time and effort and obviously the physical act of printing. So to make these things more accessible and in a really in a way that they are supported is to have more. If we have more, it becomes easier. So I would encourage, the one thing is to encourage young people to read more and to read value, not to spend all the time on Instagram. There are other things out there.
I think we had one question from Laken. I don't know if she still has a question. Maybe we'll take that as the last one.
Good day, everybody, and thank you for leaving this opportunity open. I just wanted to echo what was just said about history. I'm a second-year university student, and I took history in high school, and that was probably the only subject that I find to be useful now in studying my degree, just in terms of learning the skills of critical thinking. But I think it's so important that the curriculum, somebody said that a change in the curriculum of history needs to happen. And I think for a long time, history has been written by its victors, and that's why the narrative needs to change. It needs to change from one that was being whitewashed and told in being told and telling more of men's stories. And I think this is so important. So I just wanted to say thank you for being a voice in changing that narrative. And then again, I wanted to echo what you said about young people just being proactive in educating themselves. I read something the other day that said, in this age of information, being ignorant is a choice. And I think as much as there isn't a lot of content that is valuable, that's readily available to us, it is out there. It's just up to us to go and search for it. But it is up to us, and that's what we need to do to change the narrative and to just push on with what has been already started.
Thank you, Lekindi.
Thanks, Lekindi.
Yeah. Okay, I know that Vic wants to close off with a call to action, but before that, Shanthini, thank you again for joining us. I think my last question or comment to you is, you've sort of touched on it, but what has been your biggest takeaway from writing this book and the message from all these women that you covered, and your own, call to action to us as South Africans, pushing our history forward, us as young women, as women in general as well.
It's so interesting because the launch of this book, being in corporate South Africa, was actually, I was worried about it. I was worried about how it would be received. Because it is a contentious thing to speak up and to say these things. But it was so interesting that around the time that we were about to launch, there was an opportunity for me to say something about something that wasn't right. And I think that is what I took from the book, is that, and from these stories, and being in the fortunate position to be in the presence of these women for the last 3 years. Even though I didn't see them every day for 3 years, I've spent the last three years with them. And that has given me unbelievable strength of spirit. I think that is the only thing that I would want any young person to take away from. If that's the only thing that any young people take away from this, then the job is done. And not only from this story, there are lots. And in fact, there are quite a few at the moment. There are lovely stories out in the bookstores, and work is being done. I'm so encouraged that Laken said that this is something that they are looking at. So yes, for me, again, absolute privilege to have spent this time with Mom Joyce and Auntie Shanti and their comrades, and I'll never be the same person again. It's their strength has they say Mom Winnie multiplied. I think they were multiplying from those days already. So thank you again.
Thank you. Okay, well, from my side, I will let Mr. Rankin close up. But from my side, thank you again, everyone. And like we said, we're going to have these every single month. So do make sure to look out on your emails. Please follow us on social media as well to find out, when our next events are going to happen. But we are going to continue to have these conversations because it's really, really important. I learned a lot just from this one event alone today, and the previous 3 other ones that we've had. So please, we're going to have these every month. So do look out for the communication when the next event is going to take place. And from my side, that is it. Happy Heritage Month. Today, like a girl. So I wish you all a wonderful Heritage Day. It's not Bride Day, guys. Do find, a South African story to learn about, somebody to learn about, whether it's going to buy this book and reading it, because Heritage Day is not Bride Day. It's actually about celebrating our culture and where we come from. And from my side, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Refuwa. Thanks very, very much.
Thank you,
I think
Malibongwe.
before everybody leaves, Malibongwe, before everybody leaves, Shanthini, please just advise everybody where they can get the book from.
I just saw a question in the comments. So we had all exclusive books. If you've run out, make sure that if they've run out, make sure you tell the manager to order it for you, because they are doing quite well. We're also online, Amazon Kindle if you read on a device. And I found Take-A-Lot very helpful during COVID-19 with the pandemic. They straight to your door, and there are a number of other places as well. But you can just, if you do a search, your preferred supplier is available.
Thank you for that. And I think just to end off, what you just you ended off with was really powerful, because I think it applies in more senses. If I was being specific to me as a man, since we've started this series, is that, when you said you're never going to be the same again. And I think if there's anything that we should be consistently taking away, is this idea that we should not be the same. Somehow our thinking, somehow our perception, somehow our views need to evolve, need to grow, need to become in tune with what is going on around us, as opposed to hanging on and trying to retain and maintain the thinking of the past. So I certainly feel that through this process, my journey and the number of the series, just listening in, as I say, I'm never the same every single time. And hence, I think the belief is we have in value add to keeping this going, but the belief in extending this further. One of the things that we are doing is, translating a number of these initiatives into other initiatives. So we are going to be starting a Men of Value initiative. So, I really take my hat off to the men who've joined this. And that, again, is to talk to exactly what you were saying around really digging deep into the trauma, into the cause, into some of the effects that have been there as a result of the history that we come from and the history that we're currently living. I know a good friend who's thinking of starting a PhD on truly analyzing the impact of apartheid on families and the separation of men as who are migrant laborers, and that impact on boys and young men in terms of really understanding, if I've never had the presence of a father, how do I know how to father, as a very least example. So we're trying to extend these conversations. So that's one that will definitely be kicking off and having that discussion. The second one that I think we're trying to kick off, and actually Mahlatsi is who asked you the 4 questions in a teacher form, is really, and you've touched on this really, really well, Shanthini, today, is the history of this country, really articulating the true core part of what has gone on here, and done in exactly the same way as Nomvula is saying, or was it Jolly, from a journalistic point of view, which comes with the integrity that comes with. I think that is essential, and that needs to be passed on consistently to the young. And we want to start a program directed at young people so that they can learn history outside the curriculum, because that curriculum is going to go on for years. I don't know when that's going to change. So we need to start taking action. And at Value Add, we're starting to introduce that as a program, as a definitive program that will be run, that will enable young people to hear history from the horse's mouth, so to speak, but also from authentic journalists or writers and authors who have written. So the plea and the urge is, please see us we're obviously communicating through newsletters, we're communicating through social media. One of the pleas that we do have consistently is to say, if you are able to bring a young person onto the program, and by that I mean if you're able to fund the 300 or 400 rands a month, that we have the series of programs in order to understand more about the programs. join us on the overview of Value Add, where I talk about the programs, and you'll see that being posted regularly, but also join us in conversation through the websites or directly with ourselves to truly understand that we need to bring young people into the fold and build the leadership, inspirational leadership that we need into the future. Otherwise, the baton will just be handed from one generation to the other, and it won't be an improved one. So to end off, Shanthini, thank you. Thank you very much for coming on board. Thank you very much for doing this. Ma Shanti Naidoo, I don't know if she's still on. Thank you for, oh, thank you for gracing us. I mean, that was I had to run to Ma and go, hang on a second, isn't that? And Ma recognized her immediately, and it has been many years since we've seen each other. I mean, the thanks just, you know, can't be extended enough, because this is a thanks of many, many, many decades of history and work and toil and impact, as it will always have. But, you know, but for that, we sit here and are able to have these conversations. And finally, to my Ma, thank you, Ma. I mean, I'm going to swell up if I start really saying any more. But love you very much, and what you've done, I can't even recount. So, but thank you for joining us. I know I asked you to please just sit in there with family and listen on. So thank you everybody for coming on board, for taking the time out to listen. If we converse at the very least, and then read what we converse, then I think we will begin to make some of the quantum strides that we need to make, that are so desperately needed. So until next time, thank you, and enjoy your Heritage Month. Enjoy the weekend coming. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Diwan. Thank you very much. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
And,
thank you for
hey,
having
Tato,
me,
yeah,
everyone.
thank you for coming. Thank you for being part of this, and we'll join each other next time. Be safe and take care.